It all started on a day that felt like any other. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and I was sipping my second cup of coffee while trying to focus on work emails. Life seemed peaceful, until it wasn't. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a notification from Amazon. My new air fryer had arrived. Finally, I could stop burning toast and pretending it was some fancy gourmet snack. I couldn't wait to unbox it and start cooking up crispy fries and juicy chicken wings. Excited, I got up from my desk and headed to the front door. But when I opened it, there was nothing waiting for me except an empty porch. No box. Not even one of those little "we tried to deliver" slips. Just silence. I frowned, scanning the area as if the package might magically appear if I stared hard enough. Maybe the delivery person left it somewhere else. Or maybe they'd come back later. I shrugged it off at first, figuring it would turn up soon. These things happen sometimes, right? Packages get misplaced or delayed. It's not unusual. So I went back inside, telling myself not to overthink it. But deep down, something didn't feel quite right. Call it intuition or just plain curiosity, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. About 30 minutes later, I heard a voice drifting over the fence between our yards. It was Karen. Of course, it was Karen. She's the kind of neighbor who always seems to pop up at the most unexpected times. Her perfectly styled hair and designer yoga pants make her look like she stepped straight out of a magazine. Honestly, she's the epitome of suburban perfection, or so she wants everyone to believe. "Oh, hi there," Karen called out cheerfully, waving enthusiastically. In her hands, she held what looked suspiciously like a large brown box. A very familiar-looking brown box. One with the unmistakable Amazon Smile logo printed on the side. My heart skipped a beat. "That's my package," I thought instantly. But before I could say anything, Karen kept talking. "Did you get your package yet?" she asked, her tone casual, almost too casual. Before I could respond, she added, "Oh good, because this must be yours. It says *Amazon* all over it." She laughed nervously, holding up the box like it was Exhibit A in some bizarre neighborhood mystery. "I'll just leave it here for you." And then, without giving me a chance to react, she spun around and marched back toward her house, cradling the box like it belonged to her. I stood there frozen, staring after her, my mind racing. Did she really think I wouldn't notice? Or was this some weird game she was playing? As I closed the door, frustration bubbled inside me. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. Karen hadn't even checked the label. She didn't ask for confirmation or try to verify whose package it was. She just grabbed it and walked away like it was no big deal. Was she really that clueless? Or was there more to this story than met the eye? I decided I needed answers. And thanks to the doorbell camera we installed last year, I knew exactly where to find them. Tom had teased me endlessly when we first put it in, calling me paranoid for wanting extra security. Now, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. If anyone needed proof, the footage would have it. With determination building inside me, I grabbed my laptop and settled onto the couch, ready to uncover the truth. Whatever I found, one thing was certain. Karen wasn't getting away with this. Not on my watch. I opened my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I pulled up the app for the doorbell camera. My heart was pounding. Not out of fear, but out of anticipation. This was it. The moment where I'd either confirm my suspicions or realize I'd jumped to conclusions about Karen. Deep down, though, I already knew what I was going to see. There was no way this was just a simple mix-up. The video feed loaded, and I clicked on the timestamp from earlier that day. The screen flickered to life, showing a clear view of my porch. Everything looked normal at first, the usual quiet neighborhood scene. Then, about 10 minutes after the delivery notification popped up on my phone, the mail carrier appeared in the frame. He walked up to the door, placed the package down carefully, and left without a second glance. So far, so good. That part matched what I remembered. But then things got interesting. A few minutes later, Karen entered the shot. She wasn't sneaking exactly, but her movements were deliberate. She glanced around cautiously, like she was making sure no one was watching. For a brief moment, she hesitated, standing still as if weighing her options. Then, without checking the label or even pausing to think twice, she picked up the box and hurried off-screen. I rewound the clip and watched it again. And again. Each time, the same details jumped out at me. The way she looked over her shoulder before grabbing the package, the speed with which she carried it away, the complete lack of hesitation. It wasn't curiosity, it was calculation. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. As I sat there staring at the screen, anger began to simmer inside me. Sure, Karen had always been a bit nosy, but this was something else entirely. Stealing is stealing, no matter how you spin it. What made her think she could just waltz onto my property and take something that didn't belong to her? Did she really believe I wouldn't notice? Or worse, did she assume I wouldn't say anything? I closed the laptop, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to march right over to her house and confront her immediately. But another part, a more cautious part, knew I needed to handle this carefully. After all, accusing someone of theft isn't something you do lightly, especially when your neighbor is someone like Karen. She thrived on appearances, always presenting herself as the perfect suburban mom. If I confronted her too aggressively, she might deny everything and play the victim. I needed proof, and thanks to the camera, I had it. Still, I couldn't help but feel conflicted. On one hand, exposing Karen felt satisfying. Justice deserved to be served, didn't it? On the other hand, airing dirty laundry in public, even if it was true, could create tension in the neighborhood. People like Karen had a way of turning situations around to make themselves look better. Would anyone believe me? Or would they side with her because she was so nice and always helped out at community events? While I debated my next move, memories of past encounters with Karen flooded back. Like the time she accidentally parked her car in our driveway for 3 days while hers was in the shop, despite having plenty of space in her own garage. Or the time she borrowed a lawn chair for a barbecue and returned it months later, rusted and broken. Little things, sure, but they added up. Maybe this package incident wasn't an isolated event. It was just the latest chapter in a long history of questionable behavior. By the time I snapped out of my thoughts, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room. I glanced at the clock and realized hours had passed since I'd started reviewing the footage. Tom would be home soon, and I needed to decide how to handle this before he walked through the door. He'd have questions, and I needed answers, both for him and for myself. With a deep breath, I grabbed the laptop and headed outside. The cool evening air hit my face as I crossed the yard, determination growing with each step. Whether Karen liked it or not, this conversation was happening tonight. She couldn't hide behind her hydrangeas forever. The closer I got to Karen's house, the more my nerves started to kick in. What if she denied everything? What if she tried to turn the tables on me and make *me* look like the bad guy? My grip tightened on the laptop as I reminded myself that I had proof. Solid, undeniable evidence. There was no way she could talk her way out of this one. Karen was outside when I arrived, watering her prized hydrangeas. She looked every bit the picture-perfect neighbor. Yoga pants, a breezy blouse, and sunglasses perched neatly on top of her head. The faint scent of lavender wafted through the air, courtesy of whatever expensive candle she probably burned indoors. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was living in some kind of suburban dream world where nothing ever went wrong. "Oh, hey," she chirped, spotting me. Her smile was wide and practiced, the kind that made you feel welcome until you realized it didn't quite reach her eyes. "What brings you over?" I didn't waste any time with pleasantries. Instead, I held up the laptop, turning the screen toward her so she could see the footage playing in vivid detail. It showed her walking up my driveway, hesitating for a split second, then grabbing the package and carrying it away. Her expression shifted instantly. from cheerful to shocked, then defensive. "That's not what it looks like," she stammered, fumbling with the watering can in her hands. For once, her polished demeanor cracked, revealing something far less put together underneath. "I thought it was mine. You wouldn't believe how many packages I order." "Really?" I shot back, raising an eyebrow. My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. This wasn't about misplacing a package. It was about lying and taking what didn't belong to her. Because according to this video, you hesitated for exactly 5 seconds before picking it up. And instead of checking the label or leaving it alone, you carried it straight into your house. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she stared at the screen, her face growing pale. For a moment, we just stood there in silence. The only sound the soft trickle of water from the hose still running in her hand. Finally, she sighed heavily, lowering her voice. "Okay, fine. Maybe I made a mistake. But can we keep this between us? Please? It won't happen again." Her tone was different now, softer, almost pleading. Gone was the confident woman who strutted around the neighborhood like she owned it. In her place was someone who seemed genuinely rattled, maybe even a little scared. Part of me wanted to call her bluff. After all, mistakes don't involve sneaking onto someone's property and stealing their stuff. Still, I couldn't ignore the sincerity in her voice. But forgiving her wasn't going to be easy. Not after this. I crossed my arms, studying her carefully. "You realize this isn't just about the package, right? It's about trust. How am I supposed to trust you if you're willing to take something that doesn't belong to you?" She flinched at my words, looking genuinely remorseful, or at least pretending to be. "I know, and I'm sorry. I really am. I don't know what else to say." We stood there for a few more seconds, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, I nodded curtly. "Fine. We'll keep it between us. For now. But if anything like this happens again, I won't hesitate to share this footage with everyone." Her shoulders sagged in relief, and she gave me a weak smile. "Thank you. You won't regret it." As I turned to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly resolved. Sure, Karen had apologized, but apologies didn't erase actions. And while I didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily, I also knew I couldn't let her off the hook completely. Trust takes years to build and seconds to break. And Karen had shattered mine in broad daylight. Walking back to my house, I replayed the confrontation in my mind. Had I done the right thing by keeping quiet? Or should I have pushed harder, demanded accountability beyond a half-hearted apology? One thing was certain. Karen might have dodged a bullet today, but our relationship would never be the same. From now on, I'd be watching her closely and making sure my doorbell camera stayed fully charged. By the time I got home, my head was spinning. The confrontation with Karen had left me feeling uneasy, like I'd just stepped out of a storm and wasn't sure if it was truly over or if another wave was coming. I set the laptop down on the kitchen counter and leaned against the edge, staring at nothing in particular. What had started as a simple missing package had spiraled into something much bigger, something that felt less about justice and more about power dynamics. Tom walked in a few minutes later, carrying his work bag and looking tired. "Hey," he said, tossing his keys onto the table. "You okay? You look like you've been through the ringer." I hesitated, unsure where to even begin. How do you explain to someone that your neighbor stole your Amazon package? You caught her red-handed on camera, and now you're stuck wondering whether you handled it the right way. It sounded ridiculous when I thought about it out loud. "Karen took my package," I blurted finally, deciding not to sugarcoat it. "She tried to pass it off as a mistake, but I have video proof." I confronted her, and she apologized. Sort of. Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "Dead serious." I pulled up the footage on the laptop and played it for him. His jaw dropped as he watched Karen stroll up to our porch, hesitate, then grab the box like it was hers for the taking. When the clip ended, he shook his head, half laughing, half incredulous. "That's wild," he said. "I mean, I knew she could be nosy, but stealing, that's next-level stuff." "Right?" I threw up my hands in frustration. "And the worst part is, I don't know what to do now." She apologized, but it feels empty. Like she's just trying to smooth things over so no one finds out. Tom frowned, clearly thinking it through. "So, what are you planning to do? Let it go, or call her out publicly?" That was the million-dollar question. On one hand, exposing Karen's actions would send a clear message, not just to her, but to everyone else in the neighborhood. People needed to know they couldn't get away with this kind of behavior. On the other hand, airing dirty laundry could create drama I didn't want to deal with. Suburban gossip spreads faster than wildfire, and once it starts, there's no controlling it. After a long pause, Tom shrugged. "It's your call. But if it were me, I'd make sure she knows she can't pull this again. Maybe share the footage with the HOA or post it anonymously online. Just enough to keep her honest." His words stuck with me. Anonymous posting. The idea hadn't occurred to me before, but it made sense. If I blurred out Karen's face and shared the video in our neighborhood Facebook group, it wouldn't feel personal. It would feel like a warning. A reminder to everyone that cameras catch everything, and karma has a way of circling back. The next morning, I woke up early and got to work. Using basic editing software, I cropped the video to focus on Karen's actions without revealing her identity. Then, I added a caption. *friendly reminder to double-check labels before taking packages that don't belong to you. Doorbell cameras see ALL*. Satisfied with the result, I uploaded it to the Facebook group and hit post. Within minutes, the comments started rolling in. "Wow, bold move. This is why I always check twice before touching anything." Sounds like someone needs a refresher on finders keepers rules. People tagged friends, shared memes, and speculated about who the mystery thief might be. Some even admitted to having similar experiences with misplaced packages, though none dared name names. Meanwhile, Karen stayed eerily quiet. Her usual posts, perfectly curated photos of her garden or yoga poses, vanished from her profile altogether. By dinner time, the thread had blown up, racking up hundreds of likes and shares. Even Mrs. Harper, the HOA president, weighed in with a vague but pointed comment. Let's all remember to respect each other's property. This community thrives on trust. As satisfying as it felt to expose Karen's hypocrisy, I couldn't ignore the ripple effect. The neighborhood buzzed with chatter, and while most people supported my decision, others whispered behind closed doors. Was I being petty? Overreacting? Maybe. But sometimes, standing up for yourself means making noise, even if it stirs the pot. Still, as I scrolled through the endless stream of comments, I couldn't help but wonder, had I gone too far? The fallout from the Facebook post hit faster than I expected. By Monday morning, it felt like the entire neighborhood was talking about it. People nodded knowingly when they passed me on the street, some giving me subtle thumbs-ups or winks. It was strange. Almost overnight, I'd gone from being just another neighbor to some kind of local hero. Or maybe vigilant was a better word for it. Karen, on the other hand, disappeared. Her blinds stayed shut, and her car sat untouched in the driveway all weekend. If she ventured outside at all, it was only after dark, long after most people had gone inside. For someone who thrived on attention and appearances, this sudden retreat must have been torture. Part of me felt guilty, but another part, the part that remembered her smug smile as she carried off my package, didn't feel sorry at all. Tom found the whole situation hilarious. "You've officially unleashed suburban chaos," he joked one evening, pouring himself a glass of wine. "Next thing you know, Karen's going to start a petition to ban doorbell cameras." I rolled my eyes but couldn't suppress a grin. He wasn't wrong. The drama had taken on a life of its own, spreading far beyond what I'd anticipated. Neighbors who rarely spoke to each other were bonding over theories about the mystery thief. Speculation ran wild. Was it Karen? Someone else? A rogue delivery driver? Even Mrs. Peterson chimed in during our HOA meeting, hinting that Karen had once borrowed her Halloween decorations without asking. Apparently, I wasn't the first person she'd crossed. But amidst the gossip and jokes, something unexpected happened. Support poured in. Messages flooded my inbox, thanking me for speaking up. One neighbor admitted she'd lost 2 packages in the past month and hadn't said anything because she didn't want to cause trouble. Another shared a story about how her porch light had been stolen right off her house. Slowly, it dawned on me that this wasn't just about Karen. It was about setting boundaries, about saying enough is enough. Still, not everyone was thrilled with my decision. A few comments on the Facebook thread accused me of being too harsh or dramatic. One woman even suggested I should have handled it privately instead of airing grievances online. Reading those critiques made my stomach twist. Had I gone too far? Was I the villain now? Then came the cookies. Monday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Karen stood on the porch, holding a plate wrapped in cellophane. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she wore oversized sweatpants, a stark contrast to her usual polished look. She forced a tight smile and held out the plate. "Peace offering," she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. On top of the cellophane was a note written in neat handwriting. Asterisk, "Thank you for your understanding. I'll do better." Asterisk. For a moment, I didn't say anything. The gesture caught me off guard. Cookies weren't an apology, exactly, but they weren't nothing either. Finally, I took the plate, nodding stiffly. "Thanks," I said, though my tone lacked warmth. "I appreciate it." Karen lingered for a second, as if waiting for me to invite her in or offer forgiveness. But I didn't. Instead, I closed the door gently, leaving her standing there alone. As I set the cookies on the counter, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. Whether Karen liked it or not, her actions had consequences. And so did mine. Sharing the video wasn't about shaming her. It was about reminding everyone, including myself, that we're responsible for how we treat others. In a world where trust feels fragile, sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can spark change. Even so, I couldn't help but wonder, would Karen really change? Or would she simply find new ways to avoid getting caught? Only time would tell. Life in the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm, or at least as close to normal as possible after a scandal like this. The Facebook thread eventually died down, replaced by complaints about leaf blowers waking people up too early and debates over parking rules during holiday parties. Karen kept mostly to herself, avoiding eye contact whenever our paths crossed. Occasionally, I'd catch her glancing at my doorbell camera, her expression uneasy, like she was weighing whether to say something, but she never did. Still, the aftermath of the incident lingered in ways I hadn't expected. Neighbors who had once been distant or indifferent suddenly started treating me differently. At first, it was subtle, a friendly wave from Mr. Peterson across the street, or Mrs. Dawson stopping to chat about the weather while we both checked our mail. Then came the requests for advice. People began approaching me with their own grievances. A missing package here, an untrimmed tree there, even disputes over shared driveways. It seemed that exposing Karen's antics had elevated me to some kind of unofficial mediator in the neighborhood. At first, I didn't mind. Helping others felt good, especially since it gave me a chance to turn the whole situation into something positive. But soon, the constant stream of questions became overwhelming. "What would you do?" they'd ask, looking at me like I had all the answers. The truth was, I didn't. I was just someone who happened to have a doorbell camera and a stubborn streak. Tom noticed the change too. One evening, as we sat on the couch scrolling through Netflix, he turned to me with a smirk. "You know," he said, "you've become the Beyoncé of Blue Ridge Lane. Everyone wants your secrets." I laughed despite myself. Hardly. More like the neighborhood watchdog. "Well, Whatever you are, people respect you now. Even Mrs. Harper winked at you during the last HOA meeting. That's basically celebrity status around here. He wasn't wrong. Mrs. Harper's wink had been equal parts amusing and surreal. For years, she treated me like any other face in the crowd, polite but forgettable. Now she greeted me warmly, calling me by name and asking how things were going. It was flattering, sure, but also a little strange. Fame in suburbia is a double-edged sword. One day, you're the hero, and the next, you're the person everyone gossips about when your recycling bin is overflowing. As for Karen, things remained complicated. She made a few half-hearted attempts to rebuild her reputation, bringing baked goods to community events and volunteering to organize the annual block party. But no matter how hard she tried, the shadow of the stolen package loomed large. Neighbors whispered behind her back, and invitations to book club meetings mysteriously stopped showing up in her mailbox. It wasn't malicious. It was just human nature. Trust takes time to mend, and Karen had burned hers in broad daylight. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Sure, what she did was wrong, but it wasn't unforgivable. Over time, I started to see her less as a villain and more as a flawed person trying to save face. After all, hadn't I done the same thing in my own way? By posting the video, I'd wanted justice, but I'd also wanted validation. A chance to prove that I wasn't someone who could be pushed around. One crisp Saturday morning, I found myself standing in my driveway, watching Karen water her hydrangeas again. For the first time in weeks, she looked relaxed, humming softly under her breath. Against my better judgment, I decided to break the ice. "Hey, Karen," I called out, waving tentatively. She froze mid-pour, startled, then turned to face me with wide eyes. "Oh, hi," she replied, her voice tinged with nervousness. "How's it going?" "It's good," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thought I'd say hi." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks. Thanks for letting me off easy, before." Her words caught me off guard. Letting her off easy. Was that what I'd done? Maybe. Or maybe forgiveness isn't about absolution. It's about moving forward without carrying the weight of resentment. We stood there for a moment longer, the silence stretching between us like an invisible bridge. Neither of us crossed it completely, but for the first time, it felt possible. In the weeks that followed, Karen and I didn't exactly become best friends, but a fragile kind of peace settled between us. She still kept her distance, and I did the same, but there was an unspoken understanding now, a mutual acknowledgement that neither of us wanted to revisit the drama of the past. Occasionally, she'd wave from across the yard, or leave a small potted plant on my porch with a note that read, "Thanks for being patient." It wasn't much, but it was progress. What surprised me most, though, was how the incident changed not just my relationship with Karen, but my perspective on the neighborhood as a whole. Before all this, I'd seen Blue Ridge Lane as a quiet, predictable place where nothing exciting ever happened. Now I realized that beneath the surface, everyone had their own stories, little victories, hidden frustrations, and moments of vulnerability they rarely shared. The package theft had been more than just a personal conflict. It had opened a door to a deeper sense of community. For example, I started attending HOA meetings regularly, not because I cared about mailbox colors or lawn length, but because I wanted to stay involved. To my surprise, I discovered that many of my neighbors felt the same way I did, tired of letting minor issues slide and ready to speak up when something mattered. Together, we drafted new guidelines for handling lost packages, including designated drop-off spots and stricter penalties for repeat offenders. Mrs. Harper even joked that I should run for president next year, a suggestion I politely declined, though it made Tom laugh for days. Karen's role in all of this shifted too. While she never fully regained her former status as queen of the neighborhood, she seemed to embrace her newfound humility. Instead of trying to control every detail, she focused on smaller acts of kindness, organizing a bake sale for the local food bank, helping elderly neighbors carry groceries, or simply smiling at people instead of rushing past them. It wasn't perfect, but it was growth, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. As for me, I learned lessons I hadn't expected. Standing up to Karen wasn't just about reclaiming my stolen air fryer. It was about proving to myself that I could handle confrontation without losing sight of fairness. Justice doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it means finding balance. By sharing the video, I sent a message to the neighborhood. But by choosing not to escalate further, I showed restraint. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. One evening, as I sat on the porch sipping tea and watching the sunset, I thought about how far things had come. Life on Blue Ridge Lane wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real. And maybe that's what made it special. In a world full of filters and facades, authenticity stands out like a beacon. Even if it starts with something as simple as a stolen package and a doorbell camera. The irony isn't lost on me either. That camera, once mocked by Tom as unnecessary paranoia, had become a symbol of accountability. Neighbors began installing their own, comparing features and trading tips on the best brands. Some joked that we were turning into Fort Knox, while others admitted it gave them peace of mind. Whatever the reason, it brought us closer together in ways I couldn't have predicted. Looking back, I don't regret any of it. Not the confrontation, not the Facebook post, not even the cookies Karen reluctantly delivered. Each step taught me something valuable about trust, boundaries, and the power of standing your ground. Most importantly, it reminded me that life is messy, unpredictable, and beautifully human. Sometimes, all it takes is one bold move to remind us of who we are and who we want to be. And hey, at least I got my air fryer.